Well, welcome to Women on Wealth. I'm Julina Ogilvie, and today we're going to talk about Social Security. One of the biggest fears that I hear from clients in their 50s and 60s is not often market related, but it's about Social Security. And the questions that, we tend to get are we going bankrupt? Should I take it early? Will there be anything left for me? And so I'm thrilled to have as a guest today to clear up some of this confusion, Marcia Mantel, who has just released her fifth book, Social Security Lightly Toasted, Not Burnt. I love that title. Um, s
Thanks.
so we're in this conversation, we're gonna break down what people get wrong about Social Security, some of the misconceptions, and what you need to understand before you make one of the most permanent financial decisions in retirement. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you, Julina. I'm so happy we are talking about this topic. You have really hit the nail on the head
Oh, look
with
at me.
yeah, exactly. This is what I mean, your clients, the
Yeah,
advisors that I work with, the consumers I work with, and just really everybody
yeah,
is so worried about Social Security.
absolutely. And there is, of course, a lot of reasons on why to be, which is very understandable, but let's see if we can't clarify some of the data here. So the title Lightly Toasted, Not Burnt. What is the story behind it?
Well, I wanted a catchy title that would sort of have a little bit of humor, but also address the fact that we recognize you people are worried.
Yeah.
You know that this is a concern. And frankly, it should be a concern because Congress has known that the baby boomers were coming.
Yeah.
We were going to enter retirement. We were going to collect Social Security that we've earned. And yet it wasn't quite funded with enough revenue
Mhm.
to deliver on the promises. So I did want it to be kind of fun and take the heat out of, every headline. I call it the headline hype and hoopla.
Yeah.
That every time, the trustees report comes out or every time something happens, it is, Armageddon
Yeah.
and the headlines just freak everybody out. And it's
Sure.
like, all right, yes, we need to pay attention, but it's actually not as bad as you think. Anyway, I just wanted to play on that. I do a lot of my analogies are in the kitchen, and so I ended up with lightly toasted, not burnt.
Love it. And so let's take that big concern that we are going to go bankrupt. Why is this message misleading?
Yeah, it's really misleading because first of all, bankruptcy is a technical legal situation where you have to go and file a lot of legal stuff and you don't have any money. That's not the case with Social Security. I find that the big misconception is in how Social Security gets funded. And when people say, why doesn't the government just throw in a bunch of money? Well, because Social Security is actually a law. It's a really big law, too. It's got like almost 4,000 pages are my law books in my office down in Plymouth. And it is not for the faint of heart. In that law, it's very, very specific, incredibly prescriptive of how money gets into the Social Security Trust Fund. And there are only three ways, and three and only three: payroll taxes that we're all paying,
Yep.
interest on the reserve account, which is the savings account we'll talk about in a bit,
Yeah.
and taxation of Social Security benefits. So people who have higher income pay tax on their Social Security when they're filing their 1040s. That's it. There are three revenue streams going in.
Yeah.
The only money that can go out, also by law, is whatever was funded into that trust fund. So our retirees today get paid like as soon as I always think of it, as soon as my FICA tax goes in, it bounces right out to my dad.
Yeah.
It really is a bounce.
Mhm.
And up until 2021, there was plenty of payroll dollars coming in to meet the full obligation of our seniors.
Okay.
No, it bounces in, bounces out, but we had a surplus as well. That surplus sits in the savings account. It's technically called the reserve account. But that reserve account today is being tapped to pay my dad. So the payroll taxes and the interest on that reserve account and the taxes are not quite enough to meet our debt obligation to our seniors.
Okay.
So we pull from the rainy day fund. It is exactly how most of us operate our households. We have a checking account, we have a savings account. If you have a big expense one month, you pull from your savings account. It's this exact same concept.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is because there can't be any other funding under the law as it is written today. Once that reserve account runs dry, estimated at the end of 2032 for the retirement fund, there is no more rainy day fund.
Right.
So while we have our payroll dollars to fuel and fund our retirees, well, the payroll dollars are not enough to give you your 100% earned benefit.
Hmm.
It's enough to give you about 78%, 77%.
Okay.
So everybody across the board would get a huge, I mean, it's a huge pay cut. It's a,
Yeah.
I'll call it a use round numbers. It's a 25% pay cut of your most important foundational level of income in retirement.
Okay.
And that's what's really happening. But that's a really long headline. It's all shorthand. It's like, the trust fund is going bankrupt. Well, it's not.
Well, and I have to imagine that, taking interest rates to virtually zero coming out of the financial crisis didn't help the money being earned within the reserve, right?
Well, it's a separate interest rate. So the reserve fund gets invested in a particular special treasury bucket. It's still lower than it should have been,
Right.
but it's not. It wasn't
Fell
zero.
with it fell with
It does fall with the prevailing
yeah.
interest rates. Yeah.
And has it improved since we have taken interest rates back to a normal range? Okay.
It has improved. However, since 2021, we've been using, so the reserve account is now a fixed amount. It's got $2.5 trillion or something around in that order.
Okay.
So it's not small,
No.
but because we've been using it since 2021, it can only be diminished now. So it's getting to be a smaller basis, if you will,
Right.
even though the interest rates have improved a little bit.
Okay.
So it won't last. I mean, the actuaries at Social Security are phenomenal in what
Mhm.
they know and how they work. And really, the numbers are the numbers in this case. So they have projected that the reserve account will run dry. Again, payroll taxes keep coming. So,
Right.
you know, 89% of the revenue is still coming in. But the reserve account will run dry at the end of 2032,
Okay. And
current
so
projections.
just to kind of highlight what you were saying, when the reserve account runs dry, estimated in 2032, Social Security benefits could fall about 20-25%, right? Based
Correct.
on the payroll that is coming in to fund the Social Security.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And I'm
So
gonna be really curious to see what the actuaries project in this coming year. So the trustees report comes out annually since 1940,
mm,
and they report on the status of the fund itself,
right.
what's come in, what's gone out, and their projections for the next 10 years and the next 75 years. And I'm going to be really curious to see what comes out this usually in June. About June, we get the trustees report to see, has it, with the employment situation, are we shrinking our workers enough that it will impact the inflow of payroll tax dollars.
Right. And change that
So,
estimated that
yeah,
estimate. Yeah. It's
it's
there's
gonna
so many moving parts. It's constantly changing. And
constantly.
I think we'll circle back to that in a moment. But from your perspective, how do you think the different generations are viewing this in terms of how it affects them?
Yeah, I think your summary at the beginning, you're like, should I claim right now? So anyone who's 62 and older and hasn't claimed yet, it's like, "Oh, should I jump in right now? Should I just take the big cut that I'm, forcing upon myself? Or, is it a risk to wait?"
Right.
The boomers are in that stage,
Hmm.
as are the first of the Gen Xers. So
Hmm.
we've got our first Gen Xers at age 60. So they're right on the cusp of being able to pull at age 62, the earliest age you can claim. It's
Hmm.
the worst age for most people to claim, but everyone seems to know 62 is when they can jump in the pool.
Right. Hmm.
So the Gen Xers are understandably nervous, like, whoa, what's going to happen? The millennials, though, I find to be the most interesting. My kids are the millennials. I've got a 30, almost 35-year-old daughter and an almost 30-year-old this year. And they're really good because they live with, well, they live in Minnesota now and I live in Boston, but they grew up with me and they're pretty practical and they're pretty financially savvy. But they report in and say, "Mom, all of our friends, they know Social Security is not going to be there." It's like, not going to be there for me. They've already eliminated it entirely. And it's like, girls, that's really fine and dandy. If you want to think Social Security is going to disappear, have at it. However, what are your friends doing to make up that savings?
Mhm.
Because you're still going to retire and you still have to live and eat in retirement.
Mhm.
So if you're not having your, you know, portion put in 6.2% of your payroll tax put in matched dollar for dollar by your employer,
Correct.
are your little friends now taking another 25, 30% of their income and socking it away in tax deferred, safe, secure, and COLA, cost of living adjusted future growth? Because
Likely
I'm pretty
not.
sure they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So,
true.
it's we talk about one side of the coin, but forget the other side, right?
Yeah.
If it disappears, and we all know this. I mean, the Congress members all know this, that
Mhm.
the math doesn't work. The actuaries know this. All of us in the industry know. Unless you were in that tippy top of the top 1%, if you don't have a foundation of Social Security, you won't make it through retirement. Retirement is well, we talked earlier, Juliana, 30 years is the benchmark. We
Mhm.
start at 30 years. Some of people will retire earlier and have a longer retirement.
Right.
Well, if you don't have income from an employer, it doesn't grow on trees. So I find the generations really fascinating. And the millennials, we need to help them along a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
no, and I find it so fascinating as well. And, the conversations come up all the time when you do financial plans. And obviously we're putting in social security estimations. And that always brings this entire discussion to a very lively debate. So
Indeed.
you mentioned that people are claiming early because they're nervous.
Yes.
Uh, why can that decision really hurt them?
And it
And
really hurts. So it's
yes,
on a lot of levels. So let's recognize people are nervous and the knee jerk reaction, and it's a logical one, is let me get it while it's here and I can sleep better at night. For some people, they will in fact go down that route. However, there are really important consequences and considerations that we all need to think about before claiming. The first is if you claim as early as age 62, you have signed yourself up for an automatic, immediate, permanent 30% cut
right.
in a benefit amount that you already don't think is all that high.
Hmm.
Like our top earners, the best you can get this year if you're at your full retirement age is about $4,000 a month.
Hmm.
Well, you take, a third off of that, you're not happier with that.
Right.
So that's the first consideration. The second and the bigger one is who are you providing income for? So if you are a single person, a single filer, you only have you to rely on into your 90s.
Right.
So if you claim early, you're going to lock in the smallest amount of income you can have all through your retirement.
Right.
So you're going to chew up more of your personal portfolio when you need to spend the money in retirement to actually live and eat and deal with inflation. So that's not always a good balance of an equation. If you're married, part of a married couple, and you're the higher earner, you have I call it a dual role that you play as the higher earner.
Yes.
There's generating sufficient cash flow for when both of you are alive in those early years or decades of retirement, but
Hmm.
it's also protecting the surviving spouse. Because what people don't realize is in married couples, not partners, this only works for legally married couples, same sex married or opposite sex married couples, but you have to be married,
Legal. Yep.
legal married. Yep. In that case, the higher earner's benefit is the only one that remains after the first person dies.
Hmm.
So, if my husband is Dan. If Dan's the higher earner, gets the bigger benefit, and he dies first, I will get that step up, if you will. And I will get an additional amount so that I'm getting the same amount Dan was getting when I lose what I was getting. So the household income drops between a third and a half, depending on your particular situation and
Yeah.
your individual numbers.
Yeah.
That's a huge consequence for
It is
when
huge.
it really is. And not only is that huge, but another big two big pieces to this are cost of living adjustments. When you claim early, the annual COLA, which everybody complains about.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only 2.8%. It's only 2.7%. Like nothing's ever good enough, right? But when you claim early, you set your base to be the lowest amount possible. So your annual increases are going to be that much tinier,
Even pioneer. Yeah.
So you're not happy with that. And what is the other big piece? Part B premiums. Medicare Part B premiums are automatically reducing your Social Security paychecks
Yes.
before they ever land in your account. So once you have both Social Security and Medicare turned on,
Mhm.
they're coordinated and administered under Social Security.
Yeah.
So you don't get your $4,000 paycheck. You get $4,000 minus Part B. Well, if you didn't get 4,000 because you started at 3,000
Mhm.
by claiming early, your Part B premium doesn't change. It's a dollar amount, not a percentage of something. So you really have so many pieces to this. Just this one decision affects so much. We sometimes just are not thinking through all the consequences. And unless you're putting together those full retirement income 30-year outlook plans, you sometimes don't see it right away. But you
Yeah.
see it when you're 80 and you go, oh,
It
dang,
it
shouldn't have claimed that at
yeah.
62. That's too bad.
Well, you triggered something in my mind that has been coming up a lot lately, where if your Social Security should be, let's say, 4,000, and
Mhm.
you claim it early and it's closer to 3,000, right? That
Yep.
difference of $1,000 a month, I have run financial plans where just changing $1,000 a month of expenses can derail over 30, 35 years the plan. And so that just
Completely.
making that social and Marcia, by the way, do you know the statistic? I've heard I have a rough idea, but do you know the statistic of how many Americans claim at 62?
Two-thirds. Oh, sorry. Two-thirds claim before full retirement age,
Yeah.
and half of those claim at 62.
At 62.
About 30% of the people. Yeah.
Amazing.
It is stunning when
And
they don't need it,
when they don't
because
need it.
that's the other side you always hear, like, "Well, I don't actually need that money, but I want it because it's mine."
Right. Going back to what you said, it's I don't trust the system. I don't
Right.
trust it'll be around. The other one that I get a lot too is I'm not going to live as long as you're suggesting in this financial plan of being in retirement for 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
So I
Like,
might as well
you're
start taking it now.
insane thinking I'm gonna live that long.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny. My mom is turning 87 this year,
Wow.
and she's mad. And she's sharp as a tack, let me tell you. But she has continually said, because I've been in this industry for almost, well, not quite 35 years, but close.
Mhm.
My mom always planned to die at 73 because that's when her mother died. And her dad died even earlier. So she doesn't have, and that's many people have that in their heads going,
Yeah.
oh, but my parents died so early. So there's no way I could live into my 90s.
Right.
But I have been sharing with my mother for at least 15, maybe 20 years. Mom, you're not going to die. You're going to live to 100. I will be the one dead before you. You're going to outlive me. And she's always just thought I was being fresh. Yes, there's that too.
Yeah.
But here she is coming up on 87. It's like, I never thought I could possibly live this long.
Right.
It's like, it isn't about I mean, unless you have what do I want to say? Like an illness diagnosed that is going to, shorten your life. You've been given 6 months to live. You've been given six
Mm.
years to live. There are people in that category in our
Sure.
60s that happens. Okay, you're going to have a different strategy than others. But if you don't have that health situation, go with the numbers we all know. Know that on average, if you get to 65, which is the mark, that's the hurdle. So anyone who makes it to 65, you now have a 50-50 chance of living well into your knees.
Correct.
And especially those of us who have greater wealth, better access to all the healthy stuff we're supposed to have, who
Yes.
work with financial advisors, this is the cohort that lives a really long time.
Right. And I was looking for that statistic before we
Oh,
jumped
did you
on this
find
because I think you're referencing what I love, which is the JP Morgan Guide to Retirement that has these
Yep.
statistics. I worked for JP Morgan for quite some time and I've been following this statistic for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And that study every year, it slightly increases, right? So to your
Yep.
point of if you live to 65 today, that is for a 65-year-old today. I'm trying to imagine what that statistic is gonna be for my teenage girls by the
Right.
time they were right, we continue to live longer, and I
Yes.
think that we need to understand that as a society because the biggest concern I think this industry has is that people are just gonna run out of money. You said this earlier, you have one chance to make this decision.
One. Yeah. Technically, if we're being completely accurate and going by the law, there are two ways to undo a claim. But I
Okay.
will tell you, in my 25 years of working on this, 2 people have undone their claims
Wow. Okay.
because you don't. You know, you just don't. You either don't know about the first way to undo the claim. It's called the do-over. Like, let's pretend I didn't claim at 62. I made a mistake.
Mhm.
You only have 11 payments that get deposited. If you wait until the 12th payment, you cannot do over. And you have to pay all the money back. And your spouse has to pay all their money back. And if you had any claims on part A, you have to pay all the money back.
Yep.
No one writes that check. The other time you can suspend your benefits. And this I have seen, it's only one time, but a couple where they both lost their jobs in their early 60s. They needed the money.
Yeah.
Okay, claim. This is when you need to
Sure.
claim the money. It's what it's there for. It's insurance.
Right.
So
Yep.
they claimed, but then 2 years later, he got a job and it was a good job. So they no longer needed his benefit. Well, he had to wait until full retirement age. You can't just willy nilly pick a day and say, I want to suspend my benefits. But you can wait until full retirement age, 67 for most of us now. And then you can call Social Security and say, can you just suspend my benefit now?
Yeah.
I have other income. They don't care why, they will suspend it for you. And the goal is to regrow some of what you lost by claiming early by
Mhm.
getting these delayed retirement credits that happen between 67 and 70. You
Right.
get an additional 8% per year
Mhm.
on your benefit amount. So you regrow a good portion to get you back to your optimal amount, which was calculated for your age 67.
Okay. And
But other than that, but no one does this really in the real world. You're used to getting that money coming in. So you just
absolutely.
keep it going.
And you bring up a really good point with that story just now in that, uh, you and I are not suggesting that everyone should wait until their full retirement age or even later, right? Because if you delay it, you get more than 100%, right? And then the smallest percentage, of course, that choose to actually do that. But I think it's a very personal decision, not just emotionally, but financially. And so I love these, we're so fortunate in this industry. There are these sophisticated financial planning tools that we as advisors get to use, and we can run these scenarios if we understand the full picture of assets, liabilities, cash flow, goals,
Legacy, right?
legacy, right? We can run scenarios for clients to show them what the effect is of taking it early and taking it at full retirement age or maybe even waiting longer. And it's a lot of money. Right?
It's a
These
lot of
decisions
money.
are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for some, even hundreds of thousands for others, depending on, these
Yes.
decisions, right?
Absolutely. So in the new book, The Lightly Toasted, Not Burnt, I did a calculation, simple, simple math. I'm not an actuary here, but
Yep.
because people always sort of feel like, God, we've put so much in with our payroll taxes. Yes, you did. You contributed based on the law. Your employer had to match that. So they put in the same amount, right? So you've got, let's call it $400,000.
Mhm.
If you live until your mid 80s, you get twice as much back than what you even put in. You
That's
live into your 90s, it's like two and a half. People literally get, and these are not always the highest earners, but even medium, you're getting $3,000, $2,800. You get millions of dollars back, a million total, a million and a half. This is huge money for most of us. So it is not an inconsequential decision at all.
right. No, thank you for going through that. So
And also, can I just jump in, Julian, and also say, what I find, I work with a lot of financial advisors, and because we need to be efficient and move through many, many, many parts of the puzzle,
yeah.
we're looking for these sort of rules of thumb. So when you mentioned, we don't try to get you to, wait until 70, or we don't try to get you to wait until a particular age. It is going to be different for everyone.
Mhm.
And I will say, there is no rule of thumb. There's some basic math. I mean, anyone can look at their full retirement age amount,
Yeah.
$4,000, and then multiply by 1.24 and get something larger than that at age 70. You go 4,000 or 5,200, whatever it is.
Right.
Well, you know that 5,200 is higher than 4,000.
Yeah.
That's not the equation, though.
Mhm.
It has to fit in with everything else. You're exactly right. And this is not a decision you make on an island here.
No.
Everything in your personal world has to all be connected,
Yeah.
and it's but one piece. And most people don't wait. The best years, 10% of boomers now wait until age 70 to claim at 70. Typically, I would venture to say 90, if not 95% of the people who wait, they wait because they're still working. They
Mhm.
don't need the money.
They don't need the money.
Hey, if that's you, have at it. Wait
Exactly.
until 70 because you're not tapping your portfolio.
Mhm.
It's continuing to grow. You're not challenging your legacy goals. Those are intact.
Yeah.
You're working. That's the magic.
My grandfather used to say, if I in a perfect world, I would spend all my money and bounce the check to the undertaker. There's a lot I think there's a lot behind that, but, this is not an easy decision because we don't know, right? We don't
Right.
have that date, and we should not have that date in our mind. And
Right.
so the goal is just to be as efficient as we can,
Yes.
with these decisions and know that you have decisions that, can really change your future financial plan. Now,
Yep.
you also mentioned full retirement age now for most is 67.
Right.
It was 65, right? So
Which
the
people still think it is. This goes back to 1983, the year I got married, Julina, when in the Reagan administration, the last time the trust fund went bankrupt,
Yeah,
which it didn't, but the reserve account did run dry.
yes,
Reserve account ran dry in 1982. Miraculously, Congress passes a massive suite of laws, amendments to Social Security called the 1983 Social Security Amendments.
that's right.
And in that bunch of amendments of how do we get Social Security ready for the boomers,
Mhm.
they increased the retirement age from 65
Yeah.
by 2-month increments up to 67 for anyone born 1960 and later. So I laugh about this because it's 40 years ago. Congress changed the full retirement age from 65 to 67, and America didn't get the memo. So it's comical.
We're gonna come back to that in a second, but there's also misunderstanding around earnings limits.
This is super important to know. When you want to claim early before full retirement age, again, you can, if you're 62 and older, you can claim. However, if you are making more than roughly $24,000 this year,
Mhm.
comes out to just under $2,000 a month, you will have a clawback in your benefit payments. You will not get all of them.
Mhm.
So when you earn over the earnings limit, Social Security is first going to make an adjustment because the foundational concept underneath Social Security, why we even have this law, is
Mhm.
that it is for retirement. If you are still working, you are therefore not retired. So you're not getting paid from both hands, the employer and Social Security. So there's a calculation, a series of calculations, but the bottom line is you don't get less money per month if you exceed the earnings limit. You get no money for a whole bunch of months. And mostly people who, again, working with advisors, you're making a pretty good living. You can claim at 62, you get zero from Social Security.
Yeah.
So why did you claim?
Well, the other misunderstanding is Social Security benefits that are taxed.
Yes. So people are frustrated because what you hear from Social Security is almost no one gets taxed on their benefits. It was a tax going in. It's your FICA tax. It's literally what it's called, the FICA tax, or the payroll tax. And then you find out, and again, everyone in the advisory world, by and large, you will have some of your Social Security income show up on the front of your 1040 as income, and you will pay ordinary income tax on up to 85% of the dollars you receive, the gross dollars you received as Social Security benefits.
Mhm.
So it shows up. I just had the 1040 out the other day. I forget what line it is. Line, oh, I don't remember, 7 maybe. It literally says Social Security, how much did you get? How much is taxable? And there's a worksheet that you or your accountant goes through to
Mhm.
determine how much of your, and how much, $35,000, if that was your gross Social Security benefit this year, how much of that needs to be taxed as income?
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah, you're going to be taxed at your ordinary income tax rate on the vast majority of your Social Security benefits. The thresholds are super low. It's if we call it the combined income. Your combined income, which is your AGI plus one half of your Social Security gross benefits household, plus any non taxable interest. You add those three numbers together. If they are higher than $32,000, married filing jointly, up to 85% of your income will be your Social Security benefits will come forward as income to be part of your tax obligation.
So your AGI, half of your
Right?
gross Social Security
Social
benefits.
Security plus your non-taxable interest, your muni bond interest.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So people are thinking, hey, I can get away from a lot of interest. I mean, especially as interest rates are going up. Maybe I can, not pay so much in taxes. So I'm going to go the tax-free route.
Right.
Sure, that might be a great strategy for you. But in a worksheet to determine your Social Security taxable income, to determine your Medicare Part B premium, all that comes back in. So
Yeah.
you don't really get to skirt as much as you think you do.
As you think you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I bring all these points up not only because everyone really needs to understand this, but when you hear we're going to run out of money with Social Security, there are a lot of proposals out there right now of what the administration can do to I think I years ago I heard the word just bend the system, right? S-
Yeah.
To
It can bend and flex.
it can bend and flex. So and it has. Do they change the full retirement age again?
Right.
Right? Do they tax differently on the Social Security benefits? Do they change the earnings limit? Right?
Yep.
There are all these ways that they can sort of tweak the system to keep it going for longer, and I think that that's what the administration needs to consider.
That is exactly it. These proposals have been around for 25 years. They're really good. The various proposals, they're creative. There's a bipartisan think tank in Washington, the Congressional Federal Budget Institute or something.
Yep.
It's interesting. They look at what they're calling novel ideas for how can we better fund
Mhm.
Social Security without harming the lower income people.
Right.
There's always a balance. And some of the ideas I think are wildly creative. One is, we don't income tax our 401ks or most other corporate benefits,
Mhm.
especially for the executive comp
Sure.
folks, non-qualified deferred comp and stock and ESOP plans and whatnot. They're not federal income taxed or they're not FICA. You don't pay payroll tax. You only pay payroll tax on your wages. So there's these novel ideas of, well, what if we tax some of these benefits
Mm.
instead of just letting them go scot-free into the buckets where they still get their tax deferred earnings
Right.
growth. So it's things like that or playing with the inflation rate, the COLA. Is
Mhm.
there something meaningful
That's a
with
good
COLA?
one. Yeah.
It turns out there's not.
Yeah.
Whether we use the CPIW or the CPIE, it comes out the same.
Interesting.
So some year, but different by year.
Right.
So some
But over
years you would
time.
have gotten a little bit higher of a benefit. Other years you get lower.
Yeah.
It nets out. I did an analysis. I want to say it came out to over 10 or 12 years, like $40 a month
Mm.
difference.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, there are though lots of ideas. It is a combination of increasing revenue and managing costs
Mhm.
that will be the magic. I'm very against the idea of increasing the full retirement age, and that is because over 40% of American workers actually work. They don't sit on their butts all day.
Mhm.
And they are out slinging hammers and carrying trays filled with our dinners
Yeah.
and your body can't actually take it.
Right.
So the penalty is if we move the age up, keep 62 anchored, but move the full retirement age up, what we're doing is we are harming our service workers and our blue collar workers in a huge way
Okay.
because their penalty would be severe. It's already severe at 30%.
It is
We would
already. Yeah.
increase for that. So again, I think we should be more creative. It's like,
Mhm.
all right, let's look at the different work sectors.
Right.
If you are a blue collar worker, if you are a service sector worker, you're on your feet all day. You get one formula. The rest of us who sit on our butts all day get a different formula.
Mhm.
Like, let's not be so stuck in, well, the law is drafted exactly like this. It was drafted in 1935,
Right.
90 years ago.
Yeah.
We can be a little more creative. So,
Exactly. And I guess have you seen any proposals where they actually look at changing the law?
Oh, yes. Well, because that's what has to happen. Only
Yeah.
Congress, literally an act of Congress has to happen in order for any of these changes, including even things like short-term borrowing. If
Mhm.
we wanted to borrow, that's a question I get a lot is, well,
Yeah.
why don't we just borrow then from the federal funds? Because the law doesn't allow it.
It
That's
doesn't
why.
allow it. Yeah.
Yeah. So back in 1982, Congress did open for 1 year a
Mhm.
lending door between the Medicare Part A trust fund and the Social Security trust fund. So it was inter-trust fund lending to tide it over bridge that 1 year until
Mhm.
Congress passed the 1983 amendments.
Okay.
So yeah, Congress has a lot of power
Yeah.
in this. They just need to do it.
They just need to do it. And what have you seen outside of the United States, how other countries have addressed this issue?
Yeah, so outside the US, there's some really creative pension programs, but
Mhm.
they're mostly really set up as pensions.
Okay. Yep.
So I worked in Canada when I first left Fidelity in 2005. My first clients were up in Canada, interestingly, and they have a completely different kind of system
Mhm.
that Americans maybe wouldn't love. But we would talk about this. So they have a pension plan and then they have a similar to a 401k plan. So
Okay.
it's similar, but really quite different because their taxes are wildly higher than ours. Because they talk about, well, we get free health care up here and we
Right.
get a pension and our college education for our kids is paid for. Who pays for it?
Right.
I ask. And it's like, oh, yeah. But, when you grow up in an environment where just half of your income goes to taxes,
Right.
you learn to live on the other half, but you feel and you understand you're getting some real benefits.
Sure.
So it is very much a cultural situation. A
Yeah.
lot of the European countries, it's all about the pension and it's younger ages. I think in France, just over the last couple of years, have had massive strikes because they moved the pension age, the retirement age from either 60 to 62 or 62 to 64.
They nudged it.
Yes. And the people were not having it.
Sure. Yep.
No, they are not working 2 more years. So
Interesting.
it can be not well received.
Well,
But
another highly debated option that has come up over the years. I haven't heard it recently. I feel like this was 20 years ago. Privatizing Social Security.
yeah, no way.
Yeah.
You can't get the American worker to embrace and love their 401ks and their 403bs.
Right.
And while they wouldn't, so there's the private accounts side, and then there's the privatization or investments. And so
Mhm.
take that reserve account. And because again, we're still bouncing money out. As soon as it comes in, it goes out to the retirees. But that reserve account, should it be invested more aggressively? You can argue both sides of that coin.
You can. Yeah.
Maybe there's some real merit to doing that, but
Mhm.
not for today's retirees. We need to move that down to the 20 somethings and say, all right, let's experiment on two generations back or, two full generations and tap that Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
It is not the faint of heart.
No.
And if you were told as a 90-year-old, remember, people, we're all living well into our 90s, whether you recognize it or not.
Yes.
If you're told at 90 you're going to be getting $4,000 a month and those dollars, whatever, years from now. But then at 91, it's like, oh yeah, you're not getting 4,000. Now you're getting 3,000.
Right.
Like, well, I can't live on 3,000.
Yeah.
I
A
mean,
that's not the right solution.
it's not the right solution.
Yeah.
But I think again, it's a novel and creative way of looking at what can we do and how can it be protected. I mean, I see that very much like variable deferred annuities. It's
Mhm.
that same concept. Like you're investing in the market
Correct.
to get eventually, a payment, a monthly payment, but it is not the same monthly payment every month.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, but retirees can't absorb that.
No, unless they can change how to get the consistent monthly payment, but
Right.
with the opportunity of growing that longer term money, then maybe, but you know,
Yeah.
again,
But,
all
and also, as we know, to grow it substantially in a better way than what the reserve fund is growing, in the past recent history, you can't touch it.
Mhm.
So you can't be dipping into the reserve account to meet the 100% obligation to the retirees. So it's got to be a separate bucket of money sitting over here with a different purpose.
Sure.
Should we add that? Should we? There was one of the senators, I think, proposed something about taking a, I'll just say $1 trillion. I'm in the right magnitude. It might be the wrong number, but like set aside $1 trillion from the general fund and invest it for the next 75 years and see
Right.
where that pool is for the Gen
That's for
Alphas.
the younger generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you keep the current one
Interesting.
going,
Yeah.
so yeah, there are some really, really neat ideas going on floating out there. But we just can't get Congress to agree on a whole lot. And this is not an immediate crisis. That's
Correct.
how they tend to operate. It
Yeah.
needs to be an immediate, like, but for 1 1. Like, we got 6 more years. There'll be another whole new Congress in by then. We're not worrying about that in this Congress.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the way it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. So, what anything from your perspective that gives you hope for Social Security? Like, do you have a vision of where you think it will ultimately go?
For the boomers and the Gen Xers, or really anyone 55 and older today,
Mhm.
we're fine. I don't believe we will see a 25% ish cut in 2032.
Mhm.
There will be a solution.
Okay.
It might not be pretty, but there'll be a Band-Aid at least put on so that the benefits earned are the benefits paid.
Yep.
I see Congress dragging their heels right up until December 2032
Yeah.
before they miraculously come up with a compromise and a whole bunch of creative solutions
Mhm.
for going forward. For my millennial kids and yours, I think your kids maybe are Gen Alpha. For the youngest 2 gens, there will be a social insurance program. We have this handful of people in America who are super wealthy and where it doesn't really matter that much. And then we have everybody else, 95. It is critical. And
Yeah.
unless, if we want to stop a social insurance retirement program,
Mhm.
we could, for literally for the kids who are just being born, the 10 and unders, but we have to put something else in
We
place
need
for them.
something else in place.
So we could replace.
Mhm.
But these are, the actuaries at Social Security look out and their projections are for 75-year viability because that's a generation.
Yes.
From the time you hit your working years, they look out 75 years.
Yeah.
These are very slow moving. They're very fundamental to the fabric of this country. Could there be something new and novel? Sure. But I'll tell you, pension plans at companies were wildly popular the first half of last century and paid out in
Yeah.
the second half. And almost all of them have failed.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work. We've tried and seen that one. Social Security, 90 years, never missed a paycheck to any senior, never missed a dollar of the earned benefits.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good track record.
It is. It is. Yeah. I think that we need to remind ourselves how fortunate we are with the system currently in place, but we need to just get through what that looks like going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really picture this era, these last, 6 years to the reserve fund depletion. It must have been about the same of the anxiety that the near 65-year-olds were feeling back in the late 70s.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Because
Yeah.
back then, for the most part, 65 was the mandatory retirement age.
Mhm.
So they're looking at, a finite, like, we can't keep working.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do if Social Security isn't there?
Right.
Now, it wasn't the speed of information we have today, but I have a feeling the anxiety was just as high.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We will continue to find ways to have anxiety. Well, Marcia, I know you educate not only individuals, but you financial advisors. I know you've spoken at the Investment Wealth Institute. So thank you for sharing your knowledge to the community. Where can people find your book?
They can find it on both Barnes& and Noble online and on Amazon,
Okay.
and you see some, highlights of it on Boomer Retirement Briefs, which is my blog,
Oh, great. What's the blog?
retirementbriefs.com.
Briefs, Briefs.
FS. Yep.
Perfect. Okay.
Little brief stories about what the boomers have been doing.
Love it.
Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, that's a
Well,
lot of fun.
thank you so much, Marcia, for all the insight. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me on, Julina. It was a pleasure. Thank you.